work with our ancestors so hard and don't repay with nothing. Hey, we want reparation. Everything we want to I and I, blood, sweat, African sacrifice.
Well, simply, my name is Shelley Moorhead. I am simply a son of the Virgin Islands. I'm a native Virgin Islander. I was born and raised there. I am a descendant of ex-slaves. And today, I guess in my activism or professional capacity, I would be known as the leader of the Virgin Islands Reparations movement. I'm also the president of the Caribbean Institute for a New Humanity. I'm the founder of the African Caribbean Reparations and Resettlement Alliance. And just last Friday here in Denmark, along with a number of other reputable individuals, Danish citizens, we have founded the Carida, which is the Danish movement for Virgin Islands reconciliation. Well, the legacy of slavery is very extensive, and first thing I think I should say is that it is nearly impossible to completely expound upon the impact that slavery has had upon my people or those around the world in such a short interview. But for the purpose of our discussion today on the Danish West Indies, we can say that the effects are many. For one, our history has been concealed. It is not taught in our curriculum in the Virgin Islands, nor is it taught here in Denmark. So it is not an easy thing for individuals, whether they be here in Denmark or the Virgin Islands, to discover that for more than 175 years in the Danish West Indies, that the royal family and some very rich Danish merchants, which at that time comprised of the state, were responsible for the dehumanization of an entire people. It is not easy to discover, whether in Denmark or in the Virgin Islands, that for 250 years, Denmark colonized the Danish West Indies, the now U.S. Virgin Islands, and in 1917 sold more than 100,000 people for $25 million in gold, which in effect today is one of the worst human rights violations in the history of humankind. You cannot violate or circumvent a people's inalienable human right to self-determination and there be no ill effect. And so today in the Virgin Islands, we are experiencing a number of social ills, a number of socio-economic and socio-political problems that stem directly from this illegal sale of people in 1917 and have roots in the 250 years of colonization and the 175 years of concurrent slavery under the Danish institution.
Blood, sweat, African sacrifice, one reparation. Stole our inheritance and gave by perverted governance. We want reparation. Repair, free return to mama. I am now you want reparation.
Well, again, there are a number of diverse effects. And so it would be hard to put them all in a capsule here today. But I will say that it was illegal to read and to write during the slavery era. And I think that the lack of those civil liberties have somehow been encoded in our DNA, where today 50% of our children drop out of school before graduating. Of that the number of children that go to school, 40% are impoverished. So, when you look at these statistics and you connect them back to the history, You see that there's education today is still withheld from the people of the Danish West Indies. It's a very, very disturbing thing. Up until 1983, it was illegal to teach Virgin Islands history and Caribbean history in the Virgin Islands public school system. And even though it is a law today, there is no curriculum in place that reflects this cultural education that is also a human right. As we go further, we will find that one of the other legacies that stem directly from the sale of this people in 1917 is that we have no political status. We were not Danish citizens before the sale. We were not U.S. citizens directly after the sale. And it wasn't until the mid-1930s that U.S. citizenship was conferred upon this people. But beyond that, even to this day, it is not a citizenship that allows us to be fully incorporated. Less than 30% of the U.S. Constitution is applicable to Virgin Islanders, and we do not to this day have a constitution of our own. It has been most recently rejected by the U.S. Congress, citing that it was unconstitutional to the U.S. Constitution. So these are the many effects that stem to that 250-year relationship or shared history with the Danish state and crown.
Look how them profit from free African labor. Who built up them cities and them towns, lay down foundation without compensation. Never giving nothing to the offsprings of the younger generation. Wicked, you know? Well, masquerading on the parts titles of humanitarian. You know, I remember the shackles and the gun, raping, lynching, mass
That is why education is a most important part of the process of reparations. It is so that the truth can be uncovered and properly memorialized. It is so that the proper awareness can be created. But it is not incorrect to say that Peter von Scholten was responsible for the abolition of slavery. But it is also correct to say that his hand was forced. We had no political power as African ex-slave, or excuse me, slave descendants. Or at that particular time, they would have been slaves up until July 4th. But we have to understand that in the political arena, it was made official by Peter von Scholten's proclamation. But for the people, it was made official by the stance that they took and by the strategies that they employed. And so when we understand that the conch shell was blown, on the eve and in the early hours of July 3rd in the morning, and it signaled the commencement of a very well orchestrated plan that General Bodo rightfully attributed the title general, because you have to consider perhaps military strategy, but war without conventional weapons. They had to do everything that they could to secure their freedom. And with the blowing of that conch shell and the commencement of the plan, you found that in the early mornings of July 3rd, 1848, thousands of slaves or enslaved Africans, all dressed in white, descended upon the fort in Frederiksted, Fort Frederick, which was the military and government outpost of Denmark in the western part of St. Croix, and demanding their freedom. Well, when the soldiers or the gendarmes went to the arsenals to get the weapons and to position the cannons, and when the messages went out for the planters to come and to assist in the militia, they quickly discovered that the many crocus bags and barrels that were supposed to be filled with gunpowder had been filled with sand, and that all the gunpowder had been dumped into the sea. We didn't have weapons, so we didn't have need for it. And so that made any kind of defense against the stance that my people had taken, it made it virtually impossible. So you tell me then, in that environment where you have a fortress that is surrounded by perhaps more than 10,000 African enslaved people demanding their freedom, when throughout the entire Danish West Indies, the Africans who were enslaved perhaps outnumbered them more than 10 to 1. You tell me, what, if you were in Peter von Scholten's shoes, what would you have done? So, and from there, I think we can understand in brief the story of emancipation. But General Bojlén held a very important position on plantations. He was sort of a chemist. He would tell you when the rum was finished, when it, how long before it would be done. He was a specialist in his field, and so he was hired out by his master, and he had the freedom to go from plantation to plantation by day or by night at any time. It was harvest season or whether it was rum making season. He was a man in great demand. And so when he went from slave plantation to slave plantation, he took the opportunity to assemble those who were in support of a rebellion and the abolition of slavery. And he organized them in a very grassroots fashion. And so on July 3rd, when the conch shell blew, it was only to signal the carrying out of a very well-strategized plan. And so that, in a very, very small nutshell, is the story of emancipation. But it would take hours to expound upon that. Every July 3rd, we commemorate Emancipation Day, and General Bojlén and his lieutenant, Admiral Martin King, are celebrated, along with many other Virgin Islands heroes. And there are reenactments. It is a very profound cultural event. We hope very soon to celebrate that in Denmark as well.
And the gun,